Jake Ralston stepped into the Galactic Council's grand chamber, feeling the weight of his humanity bearing down on him. It wasn't the size of the room, though awe-inspiring with its shimmering walls and alien architecture, that intimidated him. It was the sneers and sidelong glances from the representatives of hundreds of advanced civilizations. Humankind was seen as a novelty at best, a relic at worst, a species not yet evolved to handle galactic diplomacy. To them, humans were emotional, reckless, and incapable of understanding the nuance of interstellar politics. Ralston had known this would happen, of course. He'd been briefed on the prejudices he'd face. He had been warned about the condescending remarks, the veiled insults, the dismissive attitudes of the council. Still, it stung. When a particularly tall alien with scales like shimmering obsidian made a snide comment about Earth's primitive aggression, Ralston clenched his jaw, forcing himself not to respond. He had a mission, and it was bigger than the disdain of a few pompous extraterrestrials. The first few hours were a disaster. The council's focus was scattered, as always. Arguments broke out over trivial matters, cultural discrepancies, resource allocations, trade routes, things that were largely irrelevant to the future of galactic peace. When Ralston was asked to present humanity's stance on the latest security agreement, he knew he had to get it right. It was his first real test. He began speaking confidently, but halfway through his speech, the snickers started. He could hear the whispers behind him, the derisive chuckles of those who thought him an amateur. A Vulcan-like species, who'd introduced themselves as the Othnairi, raised a tentacle in mockery, asking, "Do humans truly believe their volatile emotions can stabilize galactic peace?" Ralston held his ground. "We might be emotional, but we also have something none of you do, resilience." That didn't land well. The Othnairi laughed louder, and the audience followed suit. The murmurs were growing into full-blown derision. He could feel their judgment pressing down on him, mocking him for his straightforwardness, his simple words. He was an alien in a world where subtlety and precision were the keys to survival, yet humanity had never been known for those traits. What humanity had, though, was persistence, a fierce determination to survive. Ralston wasn't sure they understood that, but they would. Eventually. He tried to push through the embarrassment, but each attempt to regain the council's respect felt like a battle against an invisible wall. He had learned the art of diplomacy on Earth, but here, among these ancient species, his methods seemed out of place, crude even. The Othnairi's leader, a towering figure with a voice that made the air tremble, interrupted him once again. "You speak of resilience, human, but how will that help you when the galaxy's problems are beyond brute force? What will you do when your emotions lead you into conflict, like your kind always has?" Ralston swallowed the urge to lash out. He was here for a reason, and it wasn't to defend his species to the council. His job was to represent humanity, not to justify it. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "You think our emotions make us weak, but they've made us strong. Where you see volatility, we see passion. Where you see conflict, we see opportunities for growth. You can't see that because you've never had to fight to survive." The chuckles started again, louder this time. A few members even exchanged glances as if to say, "How quaint." He gritted his teeth. What they didn't know was that the galaxy had underestimated humanity before. The last time they'd faced an existential threat, humanity had pulled together like no other species could. Ralston wasn't just a diplomat. He wasn't just some token representative sent to placate the galactic elite. He was a soldier. A war hero. But this was a different battlefield, and Ralston wasn't sure the galaxy was ready for the fight humanity had been through. He held the council's gaze, but inside, a storm was brewing. He had one weapon left, an ace up his sleeve that none of them could ever have anticipated. "Forgive me," Ralston said, a false calm in his voice. "I'm not here to debate human nature with you. My job is simple, to secure a future for humanity among the stars. If that means playing by your rules, then I will. But I've seen what happens when people like you look down on others. I've fought in a war that none of you could even begin to comprehend. You think humanity is too emotional, too reckless. What you don't understand is that when the time comes, We don't just survive, we thrive. Ralston could feel the energy shift in the room. The laughter had stopped, and though he could sense the skepticism in the air, he knew that his words had made an impact. He'd said nothing extraordinary, nothing spectacular, but in that moment, something in the way he spoke made them listen. He wasn't the diplomat they expected. And that was exactly what made him dangerous. It was then that the door to the council chamber slid open, and an aide rushed in with a message. The council leader, still seated, nodded and called for the aide to speak. The aide's voice cracked slightly as they read aloud. The Galactic Fleet is under attack. A new, unknown threat has emerged on the Outer Rim. All diplomatic resources are to be redirected immediately. The room went silent. Ralston stood motionless, watching the reactions of the room. Some seemed to take the news in stride, as if it were another mundane piece of information. Others exchanged uneasy glances. For a brief moment, Ralston felt a surge of clarity. This wasn't just a diplomatic crisis, it was a war, and he knew how to fight wars. I can help, Ralston said quietly, but firmly. Let me lead the response. Let humanity prove that we're more than your petty political games. The silence in the room was palpable. Then, unexpectedly, the Othnairi leader spoke. We will consider your proposal. Ralston didn't wait for further permission. This was his chance to show them exactly what humans were made of. And by the end of it, they would know exactly who Jake Ralston was. The unassuming diplomat? No. He was a soldier, a leader, a hero in disguise. Ralston's frustration simmered beneath the surface, but he had trained for this. He had dealt with worse. This wasn't the first time humans had been dismissed by those who thought themselves superior. The mocking tone of the Othnairi only spurred him on. Maybe we don't need to stabilize anything. Ralston shot back, his voice unwavering. Maybe the problem is you all thinking you know how to run everything. You're so wrapped up in your own superiority that you can't see the mess you're in. There was a silence. The council had grown used to humans being meek, willing to adjust and fall in line. Ralston's defiance rattled them. He had caught their attention, but not in the way he had hoped. The chuckling grew louder, and several of the higher-ranking species exchanged amused looks. The humans, so brash and blunt, were easy targets. They were seen as children trying to sit at the adults' table. Ralston tried to continue with his presentation, but it was obvious the council wasn't interested in listening. They weren't ready to accept humanity's role on the galactic stage. They didn't care about human history, the struggles, the victories. To them, humans were just another species to be ignored, their concerns insignificant compared to the grand affairs of the galaxy. That night, after the session ended in what felt like a humiliating failure, Ralston returned to his quarters. The soft hum of the artificial lights provided a fleeting comfort. He sat at the desk, his face buried in his hands. He was not naive. He had expected this. But the reality of it, the outright dismissal, cut deeper than he had anticipated. As he sifted through the countless reports and documents on his desk, one small file caught his eye. It was an intelligence brief, classified. He had been instructed to avoid it unless absolutely necessary, but something gnawed at him. There was a sense of urgency in its tone that couldn't be ignored. He opened the file and scanned the contents. It was a reminder of why he was here, why humans had a place in the galaxy. The file contained information on the rising threat of the Zythar, an aggressive, highly advanced faction that had been secretly expanding its reach into galactic territories. The Zythar were a race of ruthless conquerors, known for their ability to destabilize entire sectors with surgical precision. The report detailed several incursions into neutral space, and the growing evidence that their next target was far more than just a neighboring system. It was the core of the Galactic Alliance itself. Ralston's mind raced. The Galactic Council hadn't even begun to address the Zythar threat. Their squabbling over trivial issues had prevented them from focusing on the real danger. As the Council dithered, the Zythar had grown stronger, bolder. The file also included a briefing on an elite human task force, the Black Horizon Unit, a covert group dedicated to defending the galaxy from threats like the Zythar. Ralston had been a key member of this team, and he knew more than anyone how dangerous the Zythar could be. The thought of his previous missions, the battles he'd fought, the lives he'd lost, flashed through his mind. Those same missions that had kept the galaxy safe from threats like the Zythar. He was no diplomat. He was a soldier. And more importantly, he was a human, one who had seen the worst of the galaxy and lived to tell the tale. The irony hit him like a punch to the gut. Here he was, the last person the Council would take seriously, standing in front of the galaxy's most powerful entities, yet his experience was the very thing they needed. He had saved their systems, their people, yet none of them knew. His military service had been classified, his identity hidden behind layers of secrecy. The Council had no idea that the brash, arrogant diplomat standing before them was the same man who had single-handedly turned the tide in more than one galactic conflict. Ralston closed the file, his resolve hardening. If they wouldn't listen to him as a diplomat, maybe they would listen to him as something else. He wasn't here just to represent humanity. He was here to make them understand that humanity had earned its place among the stars. He stood up from his desk, walked to the comm terminal, and sent a private message to the one ally he trusted, General Soren of the Black Horizon Unit ***. He needed reinforcements. Not in the physical sense, but in the form of undeniable proof. He would need the Council to understand the stakes. To realize that ignoring humanity was not an option. The Zythar threat was imminent. And the Council would learn that humanity's strength came not just from its might, but from its ability to face impossible odds and come out on top. They would learn that dismissing humans as mere children was a mistake they couldn't afford to make. Ralston sat back down, a plan beginning to form in his mind. Tomorrow, he would take the Council by surprise. It was time for them to understand what humans were capable of. It was time to make them respect Earth. And if they still refused to see the truth, Ralston was prepared to show them, one way or another. Ralston read the file carefully, his eyes scanning the familiar details. It was a report on the galaxy's most dangerous threat, an interstellar warlord who had nearly decimated an entire sector of space, and who, until recently, had evaded the reach of every advanced civilization. The brief contained classified intel on a series of covert military operations, strategies, and outcomes, including some familiar names. Names that, to most of the Council, were irrelevant. To him, they were personal. Ralston had been involved in the war against the same warlord, not as a diplomat, but as a soldier, one of the many Black Ops agents humanity had sent to fight in the shadows. The Black Horizon Unit, a clandestine human military division, had been one of the few forces capable of striking at the heart of this galactic threat. They had done what no other species could, taken down entire fleets, sabotaged supply lines, and infiltrated the warlord's strongholds. It was an operation so secretive, so outside the realm of normal warfare, that even the Galactic Council had remained blissfully unaware of humanity's involvement. Ralston's mind flashed back to the battles he had fought, the countless lives lost, and the few victories that had come at great cost. He remembered the final mission, the one that had crippled the warlord's flagship and ended the campaign. He had been the one to plant the explosive charges that destroyed the core of the ship, cutting off the warlord's access to the greater galaxy. Humanity had made a significant contribution to the galaxy's survival, yet here he was, sitting in a room full of alien elites who would never know the sacrifices made. As Ralston stared at the report, a realization hit him. The Council, so quick to mock and belittle humanity, had no idea what humanity was capable of. They were too busy looking down their noses at him, too blind to see the truth. If they only knew the role humanity had played in saving their precious galaxy, if they only knew that it was humanity's audacity, their unpredictable nature, and their unwillingness to back down that had made all the difference in the war, maybe they wouldn't be so dismissive. But this wasn't just about proving a point. Ralston's mission was clear, to ensure humanity's place in the galactic community. But first, he needed the Council to respect them. To see humanity as more than just a chaotic species that didn't fit in. He needed to show them that humans had already proven themselves worthy of a seat at the table. The next day, Ralston re-entered the council chamber, more determined than ever. He had prepared himself. This time, he wouldn't try to force the council to listen. He would let the truth speak for itself. With confidence in his step, he took the floor, addressing the assembly. "It's clear that the Galactic Council has yet to see the value in humanity," he began. "But perhaps that's because you're looking at us the wrong way. You see us as chaotic, emotional, too unpredictable. But maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needs." The room grew quiet. The usual mocking glances were gone. Some members shifted in their seats, unsure of what was coming next. Ralston continued, his voice steady, but his words sharp. "Humanity has fought and bled for this galaxy in ways you can't imagine. We've faced threats that none of you had the will or the courage to confront. We have fought wars no one else could win and emerged stronger, more determined, and more united every time." He paused for effect, letting his words hang in the air. "You all sit here in your marble halls, making decisions that affect billions of lives, but you have no idea what it means to truly fight for something, what it takes to risk everything for the future of a galaxy. Humanity has been doing that since the beginning." The silence deepened. The council was listening now, their expressions more contemplative than dismissive. He had their attention. "I don't expect you to understand," Ralston went on. "But one day, when your precious empires are tested, when you're facing an enemy you can't predict or understand, you'll remember who stood by your side. You'll remember that humanity was the one who saved you." Ralston let the weight of those words sink in. He didn't need their approval right now. He didn't need them to love him. He just needed them to understand that humanity was no longer a side player in this galaxy. They had earned their place, whether the council accepted it or not. As he finished his speech, he could feel the shift in the room. Some were still skeptical, but others were visibly shaken. The words hung in the air, and for the first time, they weren't mocking or dismissive. They were questioning, unsure. And that, Ralston knew, was the first step. He left the chamber, not with the sense of victory, but with a quiet confidence. The battle wasn't over. It would never be over. But he had made them listen. And that was the first step toward proving humanity's worth on the galactic stage. Ralston knew what he had to do. The time for subtlety had passed. His goal was no longer just to represent humanity. It was to show the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. He wasn't just a diplomat. He was a soldier who had saved countless lives, and it was time for the council to understand that. The next session was approaching, and Ralston was ready. He spent the night preparing, studying every report, every detail of humanity's contribution to the galactic peace. He knew it wouldn't be enough to simply speak about his past. He had to force the council to face the truth. The galaxy's so-called advanced species had been fighting amongst themselves, playing politics while the true threats, like the warlord they had all underestimated, had continued to grow stronger. Meanwhile, humanity had quietly been on the front lines, taking action where others had hesitated. When the session began, the atmosphere was the same as before, dismissive, bored, uninterested. The Athniri representative was already sneering, ready to mock humanity's supposed incompetence. But Ralston wasn't here to play their game. He stood up, interrupting the ongoing discussions. His voice cut through the air, loud and commanding. "Before we continue," he said, "I have something to show you. Something you all need to understand." The room fell silent as Ralston activated a holographic projection. What appeared was not a political speech or a trade agreement. It was a video, one that none of them had seen before. It showed footage from the final operation against the warlord, a series of highly classified clips taken from humanity's covert missions. The hologram displayed images of the Black Horizon unit in action, soldiers infiltrating warlord-controlled systems, human forces outflanking fleets many times their size, and Ralston himself planting the charge that would ultimately destroy the warlord's flagship. The reactions were immediate. The snickers stopped. The Athniri representative's smug smile faltered, then disappeared. The room was filled with silence, not of derision, but of shock. For the first time, the Council saw humanity not as a naive species, but as a powerful, capable force in the galaxy. The footage spoke for itself. Ralston's team had achieved what no one else could, taking down a threat that had once seemed invincible. Ralston paused, letting the silence linger. Then he spoke again, his voice colder this time. You mocked me. You dismissed humanity's role in galactic peace. But without us, your precious galaxy would have crumbled long ago. He paused, meeting the eyes of the various representatives. I'm not here to beg for your respect. I'm here to remind you that humanity isn't just a player in this galaxy, we are its foundation. The council members exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. The arrogance that had once defined them now seemed hollow. Ralston had done what no one else had dared to. He had exposed the lie that they had all been living in, the idea that humanity was nothing more than a blip on the galactic radar. In that moment, they had no choice but to recognize the truth. Humans had not only survived in this galaxy, they had shaped its future. Ralston didn't wait for them to respond. He didn't need their approval. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of, and it was enough. The Council could no longer dismiss him, or anyone like him, because the galaxy was about to change. And humanity would be right at the center of it.